So
There's an empty room there, but there's
I
not
can't
empty
hear you. I'm
rooms.
just imagining what you're saying.
There's
So
not empty rooms
I'm going to
anywhere
mute
else.
myself and see if I can get my sound sorted out.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Just for the speakers to know, I will be saying it, but we've got rooms, we've got multi-hubs, okay? So we've got a hub in Mozambique, two hubs in Cabo Verde, because the Musicians Association has also set up a hub. We've got a hub in Manchester, we've got a hub at Lisbon University, and Angola joined us yesterday for the second day and today. So we've got quite a few rooms around. In addition, of course, to Cape Town, of course, which is our live hub as well. Can everybody hear me, or is it just test? Yeah, thank you. Because I'm concerned with the online audience, so as long as you can hear me, that's fine.
Can you hear me?
That's fine.
I can hear you, Thomas. Benedict,
Yes.
yes, I can hear. Dominic, I heard already. Yes,
Excellent.
excellent.
Hello, Dominic. Hello, Benedict. Hello, Corne. I see the team is online as well. We're just missing Gabriel Laru. Gabby, are you around, or am I just not seeing you on my screen?
I don't think Gabriel is on yet. I haven't, he hasn't gone past
I'm
us.
going to send him a reminder.
Yeah.
So it looks like everybody's online today, which is great, actually.
So Thomas, my dear, I'm going to be introducing you, and then I'm giving you the floor, and you introduce your speakers and take over, which I know that you are perfectly brilliant at, so I have no worries.
That remains to be seen.
Oh, you showed your colors yesterday, so so we know.
Good.
And Sansa, nice to meet you as well.
Thank you. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, yes,
You are.
Thank you.
perfectly. Great voice, radio voice, yes.
Totally. Yeah, I think, are you okay if we give it another minute? We're just
Yeah,
about
we have to-
on
yeah.
time. I just want to
Go
a
online.
few more seconds, and then we'll go live. We're not live yet. There's no camera on the audience now. All right. So, Gesundheit.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Okay, so we are going to avoid the room for the moment, and if you're ready to go, if I can get a thumbs up, and then we'll go live.
Is everybody ready? Yes?
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, 3 and 2 and 1, and we are live.
Well, good morning from me and good afternoon to everyone in all the African states and countries. It's a great day to be having our third conference, full of energy from the 2 days before. Hello to the live audiences in Cape Town, in Mozambique, in Angola, in Cabo Verde, 2 auditoriums in Cabo Verde. I'm so proud of you. And in Manchester and in Lisbon. We are so happy to have you joining us. Thank you to all the students who submitted requests to their professors to let them join the conference so that they could and have grades for it, which is great. So they're all going to be writing a report on what you say. So I hope you say great things today. We have great expectations. So this is day 3 of the ACA launch conference. The conference is to become a congress from next year. And this was an introduction to getting everybody on board. We are proud to have the Companies and Intellectual Property Commission as our partners for this edition. And for the last 2 days, we've shared great knowledge by amazing, knowledgeable speakers who gave their time really generously. You all have great people to live up to, so let's make it even better today. Thank you so much for being with us. Today will be no exception. This afternoon is going to be dedicated to digital IP and social media, and we're going to start with digital IP and the emergence of the digital dilemma. And there could be no one better to lead this discussion than Thomas Dillon from WIPO. I know because I've heard him before, so I know what he'll contribute. He will be our moderator for this afternoon, and he will welcome his great speakers. So Thomas Dillon, for those of you who don't know, you who were absent-mindedly watching yesterday, is a member of the English Bar. He's also admitted in California, one from one end to the other. So he has worked in the World Intellectual Property Organization, Geneva, since 2014, and I remember that from our conversation yesterday, as a legal counselor dealing with enforcement and raising of awareness. So until 2009, he worked in Brussels for the Motion Picture Association, becoming vice president and deputy general counsel for EMEA, for the EMEA region. He was educated at the University of Cambridge, and he studied intellectual property law at Queen Mary's College in London, and I went to King's College, so again we have another connection. And he has an MBA from Cass Business School in London. He is perfectly primed to lead the conversation. Thomas, the floor is yours with your speakers.
Well, thank you very much indeed. And I apologize for the length of my biography. That's the price of being rather ancient. But thank you for that very kind introduction, very, very generous. So yes, I'd like to thank the ACCA and the CIPC for organising this conference on really important themes and for asking me to chair this panel on digital IP. Now, the way we consume copyright-protected content has changed enormously in the last 20 years. Napster launched its illegal file-sharing service in 1999, and although it was closed in 2001, it was followed by many increasingly sophisticated means of distributing illicit copies of entertainment content. On the other hand, Spotify now has 180 million subscribers. Netflix has 222 million subscribers around the world in about 190 countries. These two parallel universes of illegal and legal consumption create what you can think of as a digital dilemma, certainly for the consumer. Various approaches to enforcement have been tried, including notice and takedown, in which, of course, internet service providers have a very important role. And I think we may hear a bit more about that later. So with this distinguished panel, I'd like to examine the balance sheet of the online revolution for creators and for intermediaries. What has been good, what bad, and to ask how things need to change, if they need to change, to maximize the benefits and minimize the disadvantages of the internet for creators and for consumers. So let me introduce my distinguished panel. Benedict Ainahmani is Director of Products and Services at Pearson, South Africa. She taught mathematics and chemistry from 2005 to 2012 in Uganda and South Africa. In 2013, she joined Pearson as a mathematics coach, training mathematics teachers, after which she started in the role of publishing, in functional publishing as a mathematics content specialist, and undertook various roles before being appointed to her present position in June 2020. She has degrees in mathematics and education from Makerere University and the University of Rotterdam, where she obtained her PhD in mathematics education in 2021. Dominic Cole holds a master's degree in ICT law from the University of Cape Town. He specializes in electronic communications law. In 2004, he founded the firm Ellipsis as a consultancy, assisting those navigating electronic communications law in South Africa and Africa at large. He's regulatory advisor to the Internet Service Providers Association and other industry associations, and he represents local and international telecommunications providers and online platforms. I'm not sure if Gabby Laru has joined us yet. Is Gabby there? I don't hear him, but perhaps he'll join us in the fullness of time. So, Tobias Marjo, are you there? Forgive me for this. I think we may be a couple of panelists short. It's quality, not quantity that counts. I'll go straight to Mr.
Laru has joined us. Gabby is here. Gabby is here. Yes.
Marvelous, marvelous.
Okay, and yeah, he's online.
Terrific, marvelous. Good. Well, let me introduce Gabby Laru. Gabby's been a professional musician since 1976. He's produced or composed more than 60 albums and over 5,000 individual works in various genres. He's received many awards, including 2 consecutive SAMA Song of the Year awards as co-composer and producer. He's a member of the board of the Southern African Music Rights Organization, SAMRO. He founded in Cape Town and owns the media company Kaleido Sound Music and Media, and he's co-founder and general secretary of TUMSA, the trade union for musicians of South Africa. So Namla Paul Sibisi is Chief Executive of RISA, the recording industry of South Africa. Namla is a qualified lawyer who began his career at Webber Wentzel in Johannesburg. He's done many things, but among other positions, in 2001, he worked as Director of Legal and Business Affairs for Sony Music Entertainment in South Africa. And in 2008, he was recruited by the SABC as General Manager for Business Acquisitions. And before taking up his current position, in charge of the Recording Industry Association, he was Managing Director of Neurotone Investments, a one-stop music rights clearance and advisory services company in Africa. So, an astonishingly broad experience is reflected on our panel. I'd hoped that Tobias from Deter was going to be able to join us, but perhaps there's been some technical difficulty. Anyway, our general theme is what in the online revolution has been beneficial for artists and authors, and what remains problematic. And I'm going to invite my learned panel to share their thoughts with us for 5 or 7 minutes on that general theme. I'm going to go in reverse order of introduction. So I'm going to impose on Namla first and ask him to share his thoughts on this general issue of the digital dilemma. So the floor is yours, Namla.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon. I don't know whether I can share, because I've prepared a few slides, which I thought we should just go through. That should give us an indication. Can everyone see my slides?
Yes, we can. We can. Well, at least I can. I hope everybody else can as well. Yes.
Just a quick background. RISA is a trade association of record companies in South Africa, formed around 1970, changed its name to the Recording Industry of South Africa around 2000. And some of the main objectives are to represent its members through collective licensing and lobbying, combat music piracy, set benchmarks for and issue sales certification, organize the annual South African Music Awards, and more recently, we've started publishing the official South African music charts. We also are the national group that issues international standard recording codes. We represent approximately 2,000 independent record labels. Many of them are self-releasing, and those include the 3 major record labels, which is Sony Music, Warner, and Universal. We look at the global outlook. IFPI published this last year. It's quite a picture if you're looking at how digital has taken over in recent past. If you look at 2001, for instance, when it was purely a physical market, the global industry was at 23.6 billion US dollars. Fast track to 2020, we are sitting at 21.6 billion dollars. And a lot of that is now driven by streaming. If we look at mid last year, there are signs that the industry is going to continue to grow. Certainly in the US, we saw a growth of about 27% in the middle of 2021. And I guess at the end of 2021, and I'm sure when we publish the global numbers in April, we would have surpassed the 23 billion mark, which we last achieved in 2001. If we look at the South African outlook, physical sale of CDs, etc., has dropped drastically. The fall of about 66.6% was telling. And that, as you will see in the later slides, continues. On the other side, subscription streaming revenue grew by 20.6% in year 2020, which added about 64.29 million rands into the music market. But we also need to understand that all of these is based on just 3% of South Africans that are accessing these digital services. So the potential to grow is actually huge. And as data is data costs are reduced, one hopes that we see an even more increase in the penetration levels. If we look at 2021, these are the numbers that are going to be included in the April report. You can see that if you look at physical, for instance, in 2019, we're sitting at just under 65 million rand. We dropped in 2020 to 21 million rand. We've dropped even further at the end of 2021 to about 6.7 million. So physical sales are on a downward spiral. Digital revenue, on the other hand, continues to increase. If you look at 2019, we had 405 million. 2020, we're at 495. We've just surpassed the $500 million mark at the end of 2020. So clearly there is an increase from a streaming revenue point of view. In fact, if you compare streaming revenue, it's sitting at 512, which means the balance are physical as well as other downloads, which incidentally are also on the downward spiral. If you look at download, which is download to own, that's on a decline. Similarly, the music on hold and all of those other forms of digital downloads are also on a downward spiral. In 2019, we're at just under 60 million. We are currently sitting at 21 million. So clearly, those other forms of music consumption are on a downward spiral, whereas streaming is on the increase. If we talk of piracy, for instance, we know that the availability of unlicensed music remains a huge issue for us in the music industry, with almost a third of people saying they use illegal or unlicensed methods to download and listen to music. 30% use copyright infringement as a way of listening to or obtaining music, and that number increases in the age group 16 to 24 to about 38%. And 27% use stream ripping sites as a way of listening to or obtaining music. And that number increases to 35% when we look at the age group 16 to 24. And just for those that may not know what stream ripping is, it's an illegal practice of creating downloadable files from content in order to stream music online. It's now probably the most used form of music piracy. Other unlicensed platforms in social media, those interviewed said 14.4% use unlicensed social media platforms for music purposes. Of those, 21% seek unauthorized leaks of new music. So they go out of their way to look for new music that is, in some cases, not been released using some of these platforms. We know, for instance, that in South Africa, Piracy has been a thorn in the industry, and luckily we've managed to, in a way, restrict their activities through ISPs who have kindly offered to, wherever possible, limit those pirated activities from Piracy.com. 23% say they upload and share music, obviously unauthorized, and 18% download music and also unauthorized. So if you look at the sites, for instance, and it's all mostly BitTorrents, and you're looking at Torrent Galaxy.2 being the highest, including 1337X.2, and those are the sites that many in South Africa use to access illegal content. And this was in August. It is not different in September in terms of who is accessing which sites and the number of times those sites are accessed. So Torrent Galaxy is still leading together with 13%. If we look at physical piracy, we no longer track it as an organization because it requires huge investment. But we know that if we look at some of the street corners, they are selling USBs with multiple albums on them. And we also know that sites like Buy, they have sellers that sell counterfeit CDs. So those still have an impact on the industry. And we know that some of the retail outlets, instead of obtaining licenses so that they can reproduce and play out music, they have hard drives with millions of songs, and all of those are unauthorized. And often our licensing unit would go into those stores with the police and sometimes seize those hard drives. So on the physical side, it is limited in terms of our enforcement. However, on the digital front, we have a dedicated resource that trawls the internet looking for illegal sites. And more often than not, we are able to take down some of those sites, but some of them tend to change URLs, and chasing them is always an issue. In terms of the growth of the industry, Data Breach estimates that by 2028, the industry will be sitting at about 88.88 billion US dollars. Now, if this year, when we announce we are over 23 billion US dollars, it means the projections are that we will triple that. I think in South Africa, that is likely to be driven by the needle of penetration moving from 3% into double digits, hopefully. And certainly if we have our government reduce the cost of data, we might see even more penetration in relation to those platforms that sell music. Just on a lighter side, on the South African Music Awards, just to show that music is still relevant and people are still releasing, we had about 1,335 entries, which is the highest we've ever received, coming from 1163 the year before. So people are still recording music and they're entering the awards. What is interesting in this slide is how hip-hop has come back into the South African industry. We know that it was for the last 2 years dominated by Amapiano, but clearly with 179 hip-hop entries, it means hip-hop is back on the South African music industry. But on the piracy side, as I said, it's still a thorn. It's still difficult to monitor some of them, especially physical piracy, which requires huge investment. But that fight, we continue to fight. I think I'll end there, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Nanla. That was really fascinating. And you illustrate very well, I think, the heaven and hell of the music industry, and the digital market is working very well, but the pirates are still rampant. Well, I'm very happy to see that our colleague Tobias Maja is on the stage in Cape Town, and allow me to say a couple of words by way of introduction. Tobias is a senior anti-piracy manager for Deter in the satellite broadcasting world, and he has experience in banking, government, and broadcasting, dealing with business process improvement, project management, financial systems, and so forth, and of course anti-piracy. During the last 10 years, his main activity has indeed been in relation to piracy. He has degrees, however, in information systems from the Universities of Victoria and the Western Cape. He has an MBA from the Management College of South Africa. Deter is a fascinating and very important company involved in the security of audiovisual content, in particular, as I understand it. And so I'd like to invite Tobias to give us 5 minutes or so, his thoughts about this landscape that's been explained on the music side so clearly. How is it on the audiovisual side, Tobias?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all the audiences from different parts of the world. I think, in short, when we deal with the broadcasting piracy, that's the speciality. It's like a big ocean where it doesn't have any borders. And with the changes in technology which are happening day by day, it changes the dynamics of how we operate. And with regards to that, you know, we used to do a lot of physical monitoring, physical piracy, following up on the people. But right now, we are no longer doing it like that because there is technology. People can commit piracy, you know, in their homes. You don't even see where they are. They can put up a server in China, but streaming into Africa. And one of the important things which we have picked up over the years is we are dealing with very, very intelligent people, and they know what they are doing. And they will study the laws of the land to say how is going to be the punishment. If I go operate in this country, my punishment maybe it will be too harsh, so I'll not operate into that country. So they study everything, they study patterns, and that's why we need unity amongst, you know, the enforcement. We need unity amongst the government, the regulatory bodies, so that we can fight these people. Because one thing about pirates, they've got a common goal. They will work together in order to share servers, as you can see from the slide from Ntlantla, which he has put previously, where he showed the most streaming site. If you are able to switch off one of the streaming sites or one of the URL, the other guys will open up a door for him to say, work with us until you are back in action. But if we can't do the same from our side, we cannot be able to fight those guys which are united. And when I look in the African landscape, we've got countries like Tanzania, where they've got the Piracy Association, Pirate Association, where the pirates come together, they will talk in how to pirate your content, and they will even go to court. They say, we need this type of information from you. So, which is a challenge because it shows you how bold they are, you know, where a person can just take all your trademarks, your patents, and put them there. And all of those things, I think, they take confidence of business down, where people, they don't want to invest, they don't want to make movies, they don't want to make music, they don't want to develop anything because you don't get anything out of it. So in life, we need to protect our content producers, everybody, the whole chain. I always give an example to say, if you look at how the content rights work, we will buy the contents maybe for soccer. After we buy them, we will need to recover our money. But if we don't buy them, soccer players will suffer, the production companies will suffer, everybody who is involved in the whole chain, you know, movie writers, whatever, all the people suffer in the chain. But because the people see the end product, they don't understand what's happening in the background. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Tobias. Yes, that's a fascinating anecdote about Tanzania. I didn't know that at all. Incredible. So let me turn now to Gabby Laru. Gabby, we've been hearing this story from the side of the platforms in a way here. But what about the artists? What's his perspective? And what's yours?
Hi. Thank you so much to everyone, and thanks for the contributions so far. I know some of the panelists very well, particularly Ntlantla, and I go back some time. And I think he's given us a very nice perspective in terms of statistics from a business perspective or business point of view. On the part of artists, creatives, producers such as myself, you know, I've been in the industry now close on 46 years, and literally, I've seen it's been a journey of development of this amazing sector that we find ourselves in. And from our perspective, as professional, creative professionals in this industry, our last experience for the last decade and a half has been rather bleak, where, you know, one can make kind of a generalized statement to say that the value of music really, in real terms, has decreased. And in terms of the distribution models, it's seen a complete metamorphosis since particularly since around about 2006. To give you an indication, you know, my business, my turnover in a period of 18 months between the beginning of 2006 and the 18 months after that, my annual turnover fell roughly by 75%. Now, if you speak to any business person in any business anywhere on the planet and you say, how would you deal with the 75% turnover drop in 18 months? Most of them would say to you, we've gone bankrupt. And I can assure you, most of us either went bankrupt or we turned very closely there. So for us, it's been a catharsis, and it's been also a challenge to reinvent ourselves, to diversify our business, our income streams, and to pay much more attention perhaps to streams that have always been available to us, but they've been sort of ticking over, and we've been relying on other more prevalent or more, you know, more two-hand ones. The digital distribution model obviously has brought with it massive discrepancies within the splits, who gets what, and who controls the revenue streams derived from a specific piece of IP or copyrighted work, whether it be mechanical or whether it just be, you know, on the creative side itself. I want to at this stage perhaps just give you a little bit of insight that I come from TUMSA, and I need to explain to you the reason for the existence of TUMSA. Together with this scenario and this distribution scenario, we also find ourselves in the untenable position of being regarded as informal. And in any society, the informal sector has absolutely no access to any social protection, you know, unemployment, your medical, your pension funds. All of those are just simply assumed that most creatives or most creative professionals are private contractors, and they somehow will skill themselves into business practice, financial, administrative skills, etc. But for the listeners and the viewers here, I want to put this premise and to challenge you to think of if we take the example of being an accountant, for instance. By far, the minority of accountants are in private practice. Most of them are employed by corporates. There's a portion of them that would go on and say, now I'm in a position to start my own business. They would then, you know, branch out and simply practice those very same financial and administrative skills that they would have acquired in the process of becoming an accountant, whether that be CA or management accountant or simple bookkeeping skills or whatever they may be. In the case of creatives, most creatives would really just like to get on with their creative skills, and to make the assumption that all of them must be obligated to acquire the business skills to survive in business, particularly taking the massive change in the distribution system as Nhlanhla just illustrated in the statistics and what I've also alluded to. That's really, it's not only a big challenge, it's virtually impossible. If you had to ask the average accountant, are you required to play a musical instrument? And they would laugh at you. So why should the opposite be an assumption? So the reason for TUMSA's existence was we realized that in order to step in and provide some kind of safety net for our professional musicians, obviously, you know, we are only one subsector of the industry, and we specifically concentrate on music and anything music related, and we are there for individuals to join as individual members, not businesses. Now, we have we've got about 16 pillars that we built on. I can perhaps just share with you, please, Thomas, if you don't mind, reel me in time-wise, but if I can just just share and quickly run through these, and then you'll get an idea of what we exist for. And then later on, perhaps I can start commenting on how we are experiencing it now. Would that be all right?
Of course.
Thank you. So we were founded in May 2018, and we have really 16 pillars that is kind of our raison d'être. I'm not sure about the pronunciation of that, but hopefully you know what I'm referring to. To provide a secure structure for all who are self-employed, regularly, directly, and dependent on music for at least 75% of their income. To demand full recognition as a legitimate trade union, and ensuring that South African labour law accommodates the rights of musicians and music industry professionals. I'm not going to read the whole thing through, but just to give you a little taste. Recognizing South African musicians as specialist workers with skills vital to the South African cultural economy. Just on that point, we did, in 2018, the calculation was our contribution was in the region of 74 billion rand to the GDP. To recognize and acknowledge our South African culture and specifically our music. This is something that we feel very strongly about. It's a collective cultural brand that we believe has huge legs on the international market. We believe there's a huge appetite for South African cultural product out there, and that has hardly been done. To accept our responsibility as co-guardians of our South African collective culture, really that's just expanding on what I just said. To embrace technologies, very specifically, and I'd like to come back to this briefly, and then assisting our members in every possible way, the usual things that trade unions do, rights, protecting their rights, intervening on their behalf, etc. Assisting and intervening actively and vigilantly, working to secure a regulated live performance, recording session and broadcast environment. Just on that, if you consider that the rights have become, the lines between rights management have become so blurred, who owns what? In an advertising environment such as YouTube, who gets what split of that revenue that's generated, etc. And I'll bring that back to the piracy environment a little bit later. And then seeking good relationships with collecting societies. Why would we want to fight with them constantly? If they're doing their job correctly, we would like to have good relationships with them so that we can maximize our revenue share there. To operate as an independent organization with principles of good governance, etc. Identifying and pursuing opportunities for cooperation and forming alliances with anybody who we have a common interest with. Then to resist and guard against economic and cultural domination by any other country. I can carry on all day just simply on how America, with their power over international media, dominates our sector in every aspect. And it's the one country who's actively involved, willingly or unwillingly, in transferring its culture onto other cultures throughout the world. That's why our kids, our little kids, all when they start speaking English, most of them these days sound like quasi-Americans. Hey, yo, what's up? And that's the type of thing. We're losing our identity, and then we're losing the value of our cultural product. To be governed and guided by the democratic and legitimate will of our membership. We're also aware of commercial and retail advertising. Advertisers would much rather run an ad in South Africa with a James Brown soundtrack than a Brenda Fassie soundtrack. Why is that still so? So these are the type of things. And then to obviously identify with circumstances of other workers around the world and in South Africa. And we are loosely affiliated with COSATU, and they've been extremely supportive. I'll just park it there for now, Thomas, and I'm hoping you're going to come back to me at some stage.
Well, that's terrific. Thank you very much, Gabby. But before we move on to our next speaker, perhaps you could just say a little bit about the piracy aspect and how that impacts the artist.
Right. So, I remember the days where we would see images of our piracy enforcement agencies with bulldozers and big piles of CDs and cassettes being crushed and bulldozed and set on fire and obliterated. Those days are gone. These days, you'd be much better off using a CD as a tea, as a tea coaster. We couldn't give CDs and cassettes away now if we tried, and that's even right in the Kasi. Our product is now available virtually, in an unscathed first generational format for anyone to have access to it anytime, anywhere in the world, and to share it with whoever they like and even sometimes to be able to format it such that it can be sold for a couple of rands on the street, with simple Bluetooth, transfers, etc. So it would be interesting for your viewers to know as well. Just when I was preparing for this earlier today, I had some other meetings, but I made a little bit of time and I went to YouTube and I thought, I'm going to just pick one track. And Sansa was talking about, streaming, what it called a stream ripping. So this, I'm going to give you an example of how easy it is. And this is our killer. I was on YouTube and I thought, okay, let's take Brenda Fassie, which is arguably probably one of our biggest artists for as long as what we can remember, and may she rest in peace. I thought, what is her biggest track? And I thought, probably Vulindlela. And I thought, let me see how long it takes me to download Vulindlela off YouTube. Mind you, who has apparently the most sophisticated, copyright tracking system on the planet. Let's see how easy it is for me to pirate that. And I'm happy to say, I'm very unhappy, but I can share with you, it took me exactly 23 seconds to download Brenda Fassie's most popular track from YouTube onto my computer in a beautiful production, ready to go. So if that's the basics that we're talking about, this is not a matter of, reproducing CDs in high volumes. You don't need any infrastructure for that. All you need is an internet connection. And that, gentlemen and ladies, is our biggest dilemma right now. For those who own sharing those rights, we are doomed. And obviously, we have to look at new ways of protecting our rights. We're very keen on NFTs. We were keen to see where that's going, but hopefully we will get to that later in the conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that dramatic illustration of the problem. It's a curious thing, though, I think, that the stream ripping is very big, but download to own is in steep decline. And yet, what is stream ripping? It's downloading to steal, but you end up with a product. Anyway, that's a curious thing. Now, Dominic, turning to you. You've heard now a litany of woes from the copyright side. And I imagine the ISPs who have the problems of their own, nothing to do with copyright, just running their businesses, feel that they're kind of imposed upon to some extent by the problems of other people. What's the position for ISPs now, facing as they do a torrent of takedown notices and so forth?
Thank you, Thomas. So locally, I wouldn't characterize it like that. I think internationally, we've seen those battles take place in Australia, in France, around the world. The three strikes rules, which was essentially, we would perceive as copyright holders and other intellectual rights, property rights holders, making their problems ours, to use the vernacular. But locally, we have rather had a series of constructive engagements with organizations like RISA, with the South African Federation Against Copyright Theft, and we've tried very hard to assist them within the legal framework we need to comply with. And in your introduction, you alluded to other concerns, and narrowly, everyone on this call, probably aside from me, is concerned with copyright law and copyright protection. I'm concerned with advising intermediaries, internet access and service providers, who are required to, yes, ensure that intellectual property rights are respected, but they're also required to comply with legislation around interception and monitoring of communications. They're required to comply with the Protection of Personal Information Act, the Cybercrimes Act, the Electronic Communications, etc., etc. So there's a broad range of legislation which applies and in which we have to put this IP protection issue into that context. Which is not to say that we sit on our hands and do nothing. So one of the things that South Africa has got right is an effective takedown notice system, which is set out in Section 77 of the Electronic Communications and Transactions Act, the ECT Act. And that offers anyone who feels that their rights have been infringed, and within this context, their IP rights have been infringed, an expeditious and inexpensive remedy to at least stop that ongoing harm, which is so often the killer. So in terms of Section 67, Section 77, if you know there is content hosted locally in South Africa, you know it's hosted by an ISPA member, which is all of the big ISPs from Telkom, Vodacom, down to the small ones. We have a process which is available on the ISPA site, which is notified to the public on all of our members' sites, which then allows you to take 5 minutes to enter your personal details, to identify the right which you believe has been infringed, and to identify the location of that infringement, and lastly, to make a statement that you are acting in good faith. And we, in previous engagements with RISA and SAPAC, we've developed bespoke models of that takedown notice system to suit those organizations, with limited success perhaps. But what I really wanted to just highlight is there has been a trend since 2010 in the growing number of IP-related takedowns. So if I go to 2021, which is the latest set of figures, there were a total of 758 takedowns lodged with ISPA. 403 of those were rejected as being invalid or targeting a non-ISPA member or not meeting the requirements of the Act, which left 355. 154 of those related to infringing use of copyright, another 35 to infringement of trademarks, and another 2 to infringing domain names. And just really to raise awareness amongst people locally in South Africa that the net result of those 154 use of copyrights was 154 takedowns effected within 36 to 48 hours of the takedown notice being lodged with ISPA at no cost whatsoever to the copyright holder. So we're on a bit of a mission to try and raise awareness, because we still believe that lawyers are running off to court to seek other remedies when we actually have something which is accessible to anyone. So anyone who's affected on this call could literally in the next 5 minutes and at no expense lodge a takedown with ISPA. If it is a valid takedown with a valid concern, 98.5% of those takedowns are effected within 36 to 48 hours. So it's not perfect. We understand the dilemma. We understand the space. The ISPs, the larger ones in South Africa, as with their counterparts around the world, are trying to embrace their own content players. So now they're seeing the problem from the other side and getting their fingers burnt quite dramatically, to be honest. We also know that we have policy in South Africa being developed around audio and audiovisual content, which is going to dramatically change the landscape here. They're going to try and bring the big social media video sharing platform services like YouTube and TikTok into a local licensing, or let's say drag them kicking and screaming into a local licensing obligation, which should hopefully, when that's finalized towards probably the middle of next year, will also be of some assistance in resolving that litany of woe which you referred to. And pardon us over the day.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to hear that in the South African context, at least, there are profitable conversations that are taking place between the two industries. So let me turn to Benedict. Benedict, when piracy really took off online, it seemed first of all to be a problem for music, and then film rapidly became one of the key or the victim areas. What I've noticed in the recent years is that books, including audio books, are increasingly pirated, and it's, I think, quite a concern. Do you have does Pearson have a perspective on that? And please share your thoughts.
Thank you, Thomas. To start, I think I'll start with some of the benefits that come with the online revolution in the publishing world. So if we look at the negatives, we might as well say let's stop with the online and go back to our traditional ways, but we need to look at the benefits that come with this whole revolution, and it's quite a lot in the publishing world. When you look at the easy and quick access that the online platforms give to authoring, some of the things like access to online digital tools when you're authoring, so that it becomes an easier process than those days when authors had to sit and write or work offline and not be able to engage with some offline accessibility to certain things that can help with the authoring process. Then we also see a quicker process of getting feedback through collaboration. So you're busy writing, at least you don't have to be in a secluded place. If you need feedback from expert people, you can easily send through some cloud-based platforms and things like that. And then we see that the authoring process in the publishing world, especially around academics and all the other things, becomes easier because of the online revolution that we see. Then we also see the creative ways of presenting the content because of the online revolution. Like you can use virtual reality, you can use different things that you can use to make the content alive. But of course, that comes with all its other aspects. Then we have the assessments that have become popular, which need you to be online in order for you to access the artificial intelligence capabilities that we see in the publishing world. So there's quite a lot of things that come in the benefits perspective. But now looking at the problematic ones, I think the starting point would be the platforms. And I would start from the awareness of what platforms to use, because the moment you go online as an author, you might even expose your content to people that will pirate it before you publish it. So you're not able to go out there and say, listen, that was my content, I was just sharing it with someone and then it's already published. You cannot convince anyone. And I know many authors have been in those spaces where they end up giving away their hard work because they did not know that the platform was not secure, or they were going through a platform and they just put content to check for grammars and then it's taken. So there's that perspective, which is quite sad. And then very easy access to sharing content. Let's say you have an ebook. It's easy for you to just take a screenshot and share it all over the world on the different social media platforms. So you don't have to actually print it out and do anything. You just share screenshots of content that is not your own and that you bought, but you end up distributing it so easily. In a few seconds, it will be all over the world and the content is out there. And then I think there's too much information online that the authors that publish online end up having unnecessary competition. Anyone can publish anything. You don't need to be a doctor to publish medical information, and people will search it thinking that is expert knowledge. So at the end of the day, it's your livelihood as an author, but there's someone that's just doing it for fun. He's not an expert, doesn't have to take a lot of information, or actually goes and copies and pastes different information, puts it in one aspect, and then says this is the content. So it's quite sad when you see how the online affects the authors and some of the things that need to be done. And then finally on this, the safe guidelines on how to navigate the online revolution, I think has been quite a challenge for many authors. How do you use the information that you find? And also, how will the consumers use the information that they find? Because you're publishing online or your books end up online, but there's other aspects that are considered when people go to the internet to search. Do you have the right content that will capture the people, or are you using the right platform so that when people come to pirate your content, it's secure, it's encrypted, and all those things? So I think it's the general guidelines on how to navigate the online revolution that has been quite problematic in the authoring space. So
do you think then that if anything, the role of the distributor, the publisher, has become more important in this wild internet age?
Oh, yes, definitely. So I would look at the aspect of being an individual author. It's quite comprehensive to engage with all the various aspects that are needed for you to publish your book. And then later, when it goes online or in the digital world, you have to follow up with all the aspects. Has the book been pirated? Why is it not selling? Or has someone republished my book? Because there's also that trend where someone takes a book, removes your name, and publishes it as their own, as is. So you have to keep track of all those things. And working through publishers or platforms that help you track all that information and also guide you on some of the things that need to be considered when you're publishing. How do you use you as an author? How do you use other people's third-party content? Because there's also that aspect where some authors just pick content, put it together, and say they have it. So yes, definitely.
Yes, very difficult. I'd like to go back to Tobias, if I may, and ask you, Tobias, to say a little bit more about what, at the technological level, you're able to do to tackle this problem of international piracy. So you can't arrest or sue anybody in South Africa because all the infrastructure and the people are outside, or outside Africa, maybe anywhere. What you actually, very briefly, can you explain technically what you're able to do at Deter to try and tackle that?
Okay, we've got different technologies which we use actually when coming to the content. When we receive anything like video, we've got what we call watermarking. You might not see it with your eyes, you might not do whatever, but we've got a system to run to check where the content comes from. If the content is on YouTube or wherever, because somebody maybe in the US, like Game of Thrones, might have the same content. If it doesn't have our logos, we are going to take the whole video and run the stream and check where it originates from. If it's ours, it originates from our side, we'll be able to pick it up. So it makes it easier that way. But if we know whose content it is, like when coming to sport, we work with a couple of multinational companies. The Canal Plus, we work with, you can mention the beIN in the, or part of the Al Jazeera group. Those are the guys which we know we are fighting same people. We help each other. Over and above, we've got other systems like for takedowns. We talk with, the ISP to deal with the takedowns. At times we are successful, at times we are not. Because even for them on the other side, they're going to lose a lot of money if we say put this stream down, which maybe you've got so many people going after the stream. I'm glad to say we were involved in the amendment of a bill in Kenya where it's going to force some ISP to be able to close all the streaming, infringing streams. So that one, it will be a first step in the good side. And on the other hand, when I look into our side, we see like right now, as we are gathered together here, people are willing to help, sharing information and using all other technologies which are available to do investigation. And by the way, we still do a lot of physical piracy where we do raids, especially to rebroadcasters across them. It's very, very dangerous because certain areas, they become volatile, they become dangerous. We go with the police there, but at times they tell you to say, where this person has set up, or he's got servers, it's a no-go area. The police tell you that you need to find the other way.
Wow.
I usually explain to people to say, we work with guys which were beaten, some we had to relocate even their families, because you deal with drug dealers, you deal with people who, some they don't have morals, they just are there after money, and they don't care whoever stands in their way. So we encourage guys to say, look after ourselves. We've got a team of investigators and informers across Africa, which becomes our eyes and our ears to say what's happening. Thank you.
Well, that's amazing, and I think it's very important to bring it home to people that there are criminals involved in this. It's not just adolescents in the bedroom, and that the real people get hurt by it, not just digital damage. Well, that's amazing. Can I return then to Dominic and ask him what he thinks about this idea of site blocking? Because you can cooperate as much as you like at the national level, but if the piracy is coming from outside, what can you do about it? And is site blocking too burdensome? And is it something really unreasonable to impose on ISPs?
Different views, Thomas. So, firstly, that in South Africa, we are concerned about the legalities of site blocking in terms of prohibition of monitoring and interception. As ISPs, we also fiercely guard our neutral status. So we have law which says that as an internet service provider, you are under no obligation to police your network, to monitor it for any evidence of unlawful activity. We're also wary, and this requires a degree of bluntness, often of the motives of those approaching us, to say block this or block that. We're wary of the fact that the technology is not foolproof in terms of blocking. At whatever level you want to undertake that, you will get false positives, you will get problems that come up. So we have a copyright amendment bill currently running through the South African Parliament, which we had hoped would address these issues, but it seems not. So we remain in a position where we engage with, most recently, attorneys on behalf of La Liga, who were concerned about unlawful streaming of Spanish top-level football. And we were unable to reach an accommodation with them and our membership in terms of saying we undertake to voluntarily block without a court order being in place or some other formality being involved. They then left it. So my sense was that, well, you know, the problem, which is often a South African one, is that we're a small market which is not worth the kind of expenditure that is required to enforce those rights. So bottom line is there's a neutrality to it. We appreciate the problem, but we need a legal framework to actually be in place to implement.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, we're almost out of time, so I'd like to return to Nanla, please, for a final word. We've had a remarkably harmonious hour together, but I think that there's a little bit of friction emerging in the last few minutes, but perhaps I'm wrong about that. So Nanla, perhaps you'd like to respond to what Dominic has just said.
I guess it's one of those difficult things, Thomas. From where we sit, we would explore every possible angle to try and ensure that illegal content online is stopped. I know that our team, which includes Pierre, does engage with ISP ISPA from time to time on issues related to illegal content. And often, as Dominic said, we do find reception. And in fact, we had started saying to them, let's perhaps have regular interaction on these issues. And where we need your assistance, we very much like to engage rather than go the legal route, because it becomes quite expensive, especially for a not-for-profit company like this. So I think there is always that door open with them. And I guess the example of Faraza with the recording industry of America and the ISP there is also another example. So if not for the interaction with an ISP in the US, would still have had huge problems with Faraza. I know they are probably going to change their URL and perhaps even relocate, and then it means we must chase them wherever we go, and that is usually the biggest problem.
Yes. Well, I apologize to the other members of the panel because we've run out of time. I'd like to thank you all for really fascinating contributions to the place Piracy in a much larger context, both of the position of the artists and the industries that are outside the copyright sector altogether. But we know from Benedict that the role of the publisher is still absolutely crucial, and that's, I think, a theme that means that people have to keep talking. Anyway, I've gone over by 2 minutes. I apologise very much. But, thank you again, and that's the end of this panel.
How efficient, 2 minutes, wow. Thank you so much, Thomas, and thank you to all the speakers for your time and your availability. Thank you so much. That was very interesting. Not too much friction, Thomas. I was expecting a bit more of a boxing match, but it seems to have gone really. Oh dear, I can see some threats coming up there from that corner over there. So not too much friction. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you for your leadership, Thomas. And we'll see you again soon, I hope. And please stay with us as participants for the next session. We're going to take, to all the rooms, we're going to take a 10-minute comfort break, and we'll be back after 10 minutes, okay? So see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Did everybody submit their tests? Anybody still have one? And I gave
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello, Maureen.
Hello, Connie. How are you?
Bye.
We'll be back soon.
Okay, must I leave for now?
No, stay there. You're very welcome. No. We're just waiting for them to come in from their coffee break.
Okay.
Linda,
Yes, Graham.
just wanted to ask, where are the other audiences today? Is there Cape Verde?
Let me just tell you, because I have it written down. Today we have an additional room in Cabo Verde because the Musicians Association had a lot of requests, so the musicians have flooded into another auditorium. So today we have Angola. We have the highest audience we've had over the 3 days, the highest audience today. Hello, Amanda. We have Angola, Mozambique, Cabo Verde in 2 different auditoriums, and we have Manchester and we have Lisbon.
Todo bem.
Tudo bem. So are we back? Are we officially back, Amanda? I can see you on stage.
You are
your
joined,
screen.
but you are upside down.
I'm upside down. So please tell me when the audience is ready in Cape Town so that we can start.
Jared, can you show a screenshot of the room a bit in between?
Okay, so shall we go? Yes? Ready?
Yes, good.
So, and again, as I didn't mention, Cape Town is also live, okay? Right.
Will Linda start when we're ready to begin? Okay. Everybody in, just close the doors. I'm good to go.
Okay, so welcome back. I hope you had a great cup of coffee. I rushed out to get one and I'm back as well to join you. I just want to point out that we are at peak audience. At this time, we have over 1,708 people watching us around Africa and Europe. So I'm really, really, really proud of what we achieved. Round of applause to all the rooms, okay? And to all our great speakers. As we've gone in crescendo over the 3 days, it seems also that the social media and the digital IP are of particular interest, as lots of musicians have joined and lots of young people. So obviously the topics, we were on par with the topics chosen for today. So welcome back to the social media panel. It's very important that we understand that a lot of people are interested in this session. And so let's think about how this has changed our lives and the organizations and the way we do business and the way we communicate, even the way we manifest ourselves for the various reasons. Today we woke up with the beginning of a war in Europe, and already I can see groups forming and people communicating with each other. So social media has completely changed our lives. But to talk to you about that, we're going to have a panel expertly moderated by our fabulous Amanda on stage, live from Cape Town. And I'm just going to tell you about our moderator. So Amanda joined the Department of Trade and Industry in 1993, a long time ago for both of us, Amanda, and is currently Senior Manager, Copyright and IP Enforcement Expert at the Companies and Intellectual Property Commission, the CIPC. In 1999, she took responsibility for the implementation of the Counterfeit Goods Act, number 37 of 1997. She also oversaw the declaration of the first counterfeit goods depot. She has also been involved in the training of law enforcement officials across government departments to implement that act. We have had law enforcement training throughout the mornings every day. And Amanda was nominated as vice chair at the first meeting of WIPO's Advisory Committee on Enforcement, held in Geneva in 2003. She has also chaired ACE. She also chaired ACE in 2015 and 2016. And she holds a degree from the Rand Afrikaans University in Development Economics and an honors degree in economics. So we are being expertly led this afternoon, and I will hand over to your moderator and welcome all and have a great session.
Thank you very much, Tess, and also for that kind introduction. We have been going for 3 days. We're coming to the end of our 3rd day, and we're closing, I hope, on a very high note. So the social media discussion will follow very closely in the footsteps of the previous discussion. Digital social media is considered one of the greatest innovations coming out of the digital evolution. And it has actually changed the lives of people and organizations across the world. The way in which people communicate, distribute, keep, and consume creative content has changed dramatically so. And it's changed even more over the last 2 years that we have lived within a pandemic. So before I introduce my esteemed panel to you this afternoon, let me start with the following words from Jonathan Band. He was writing an article about the copyright paradox, fighting content piracy in the digital era way back in 2001. And he ended his article by saying, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean that you're not out to be get. Now, in 2022, with social media being considered as one of the greatest innovations, as I mentioned, let's have a discussion on how we deal with this challenge we face in the social media space. Let me introduce my panel members to you. I'm going to start with the lady on board. So welcome, Cornay. She is Cornay Gilfillin. She's currently a practicing attorney, and she's been involved in law and legal enforcement for many, many years. She started her career at Spoor & Fisher Attorneys under the mentorship of the copyright guru, Dr. Owen Dean, so she definitely learned from the best. She has an LLM degree with majoring in intellectual property rights. Welcome, Cornay, and if you can describe yourself in just 2 words, what would you say? Oh, no problem. Let's move to Daniel then. Daniel Greenberg, welcome, Daniel. Daniel is a South African attorney, currently also a UK solicitor, and he has over 24 years of experience in intellectual property law. You were also introduced to Daniel yesterday when him and Vanessa gave an overview of IP enforcement on the African continent. Currently, Daniel is a manager at Lex Synergy, and he looks after the digital assets for brand owners and law firms. And his functions includes monitoring and enforcing of IP rights online. Daniel has contributed greatly to articles on intellectual property, and he brings a wealth of experience to our panel discussion this afternoon. Daniel, please describe yourself in only 2 words.
A crazy lawyer that loves the internet.
Well done, Daniel. Let me introduce my last panel member before we start this discussion. Dr. Graham Gilfillin. So Graham and I have been working together for many years. I think it's been over 20 years. So Graham is a multi-jurisdictional copyright lawyer and a forensic expert, currently based in Johannesburg, South Africa, at a boutique copyright and business affairs chamber called NISA Global Entertainment. He also studied at King's College, Linda, so you've got another alma mater. He obtained a degree in London, and then he went further to obtain his doctorate degree locally at the Mafeking University, and he focused on the copyright industries and particularly looking at how copyright law can be harmonized to collect royalties and make sure that it's distributed fairly. And his list goes on and on. So if Cornay is not back online, not back, she back online.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Cornay, let me just finish with Graham's introduction and then we'll come back to you. So Dr. Gilfillin, please describe yourself in 2 words.
Okay.
multi-jurisdictional copyright lawyer. 3 words.
Very
Sorry.
professional. Good. I hope we hear you clearly just now. Let me just quickly go back to Corneille. So we introduced you, Corneille, and I asked whether you can just introduce yourself by using 2 words.
Lawyer / consultant.
Good. All right, so now we know. I hope the sound gets a bit better going forward. So let me start with a quick question to all of you. Tell us a little bit more about your role in copyright piracy in the digital environment. Give us a few pointers of how your day would look like. Please let me start with you, Daniel.
Thank you for that introduction, firstly, and thank you for all the attendees and for this opportunity. Well, basically, the job that I'm involved in is the online enforcement of intellectual property rights for brand owners. We also work with a lot of law firms. So what it does involve is taking a lot of infringements down from social media, which includes LinkedIn, Instagram, dealing with issues originating from WhatsApp. And our job is to take down these infringements as quickly as possible. What we found over the past, say, 2 years, that the amount of infringements have increased. So my job is becoming more important, and it's more chaotic in the sense that we're trying to take these sites down or posts down or content as quickly as possible. And we try and fight the battles for our clients, which in some cases we win, other times it takes a bit longer, but we aim to get it down. But what is difficult in our job is getting the parties involved to cooperate. You know, we talk about all the different laws that are out there, but when you're at the coalface, it's very different. If you're in the Facebook environment, for example, you know, you're on WhatsApp, you're on Instagram, Facebook, you're in one company's environment. And if they don't want to take it down, they won't. It's as simple as that. If they don't deem it to be an infringement, it stays up. And I think that's what we're facing. You know, to approach ISP to take down Facebook, I think won't work because that's the entire service. So we're fighting all these battles to try and make sure that our clients' risks online are mitigated. So that's kind of the day-to-day. I know it's a bit of a broad approach, but it's really taking down as much as we can.
Thank you, Daniel. Graham, tell us a little bit more about your exact role in this space.
Okay. My day is filled with all manner of relationships in the copyright industries, in particular chains of title and royalty supply chains, structuring them, advising on them, describing them, mediating them, and investigating and auditing them, which when the auditing also speaks to valuation. And this is in every copyright law regime across the world. It's not my job to know other laws, it's my job to know a single law called copyright law and to deal with that law in any jurisdiction. So I could be in 5 or 6 jurisdictions in a day across the world. And speaking to this issue here, I mean, what's happening today, we're dealing with infringement on a massive, massive, massive scale to such an extent that we almost have to relook the business model. We are still caught in the box of the past and how we measure things. Today, we have to think completely differently and out the box, how we balance public interest and the interests of rights holders. So that's pretty much my day. It starts early, finishes late, it's relentless, and 24/7.
Yeah.
The world doesn't stop. The copyright industries are, with the streaming platforms, are thundering 24/7, 24/7.
Yeah, it's like a sausage machine out there. Corneille, you have been involved in the copyright industries for many, many years. Have you seen a significant change over the last 2 years as a result of the pandemic and people being locked down in their houses, frustrated with access to digital content? Can you expand a little bit about the changes that you've seen?
Amanda, definitely. I've been involved in the copyright enforcement industry, both civilly and criminally, for the past over 25 years at Sporer and Fisher, Sturkinico Prime Media, and SAFAC. And we basically, like Graham said, we need to get out of the old way to do things. It was hard goods that was a huge problem many years ago. I suppose in certain industries it's still a problem, but with the pandemic and with the accessibility and technology changes and developments and social media platforms that's just popping up, people share. They got the need to share. They find content, not sure where they find the perfect quality content, but they share. I've seen on Facebook, we've dealt with WhatsApp. On an independent basis, I've been consultant to the publishing industry to assist them on clamping down on the sharing and the uploading of content on Facebook and WhatsApp. But I must tell you, I think this is a pandemic now, and not so much COVID anymore, because it doesn't stop. Doesn't matter how much which industries are doing. We need to find a different approach and awareness, create awareness that it's actually wrong and hurtful to the copyright owners. But sharing is definitely a pandemic on all social media platforms, from textbooks, music, newspapers, magazines. You can name a magazine or a piece of music or a book, and you can get it somewhere on a social media platform.
Yeah, you're quite right, Kuna. In the previous panel, we heard Gabby mentioning how easy it actually is to download a piece of music. So we have now heard that the fight has actually changed. We no longer have to go to flea markets and confiscate products at street corners. We have to turn this fight digitally. So have your customers changed as well? Daniel, what have you seen happening with the kind of people that approach you to take down sites?
So we work with a wide range of clients, from banks to petroleum companies to publishers in the online space. And we found that what they want to try and do is be as proactive as possible. So what we tend to do at Lexinergy is start off with a social media audit, which means we go through all the major social media platforms and audit to see how their brand is being used, how it's being potentially infringed, so they can see how serious the matter is. And then from there, we develop an action plan to address those infringements that we find. There's some that are very serious, there are others that can be ignored or monitored. And then the ones that are serious, we implement a enforcement process to try and take them down as quickly as possible. And I think it is quite serious. We've had situations where there will be a Facebook page for a leading South African bank, for instance, where someone would log on to this fake account, and then there would be a pop-up saying, "How can I help you with support?" So then someone goes in there and starts chatting to the person because it's so easy, and giving their bank account details, which obviously leads to them phishing, getting the information, and defrauding the people. We've also had instances, for instance, on LinkedIn, where there's been fake job postings, where people have actually posted in their passports and have received fake visas in return. And this passport went back and forth by the postal service. Each time they had to pay themselves to the fraudster, and eventually they pitch up at the job and they say, well, there's no job for you. So the online space does kind of fall into the real world, and it does affect people. So the clients want to be proactive, because if you are a customer and engaging with an online business, you want to know that they're doing their very best to protect their brands. Now, they can't remove everything there. Like you said, there's a kind of a sausage machine thing where you take one down, another one appears. But you have to be seen to be taking it down. You have to be proactive, and you have to be in the space. A lot of companies say, you know what, if we know about it, we'll have to deal with it. So let's rather not deal with the issue. So I think it's really the clients that aren't engaging with people like ourselves need to do so because, they need to be aware that they have to take action, and there's a responsibility towards their client base and the public at large.
So what you're saying, Daniel, is that social media policy should be a discussion point on every board's agenda item for their board meetings?
Definitely. I think it's an absolute requirement. It's almost, I would go so far as to say it's a dereliction of duties not to have a social media policy. I think for too long, and we also work in the domain name space, recovering domains, and I think domains and social media are intertwined. And if a policy isn't put in place, it does lead to a lot of issues. You need systems, you need people to be aware of the issues. And for too long, companies, I think, have seen social media as, my marketing managers handling it, or IT's handling our domain names. It's not something that needs to be dealt with at a board level, but it does, because it is a form of engagement, and it can have serious consequences. You could have social media spreading rumors, and it could affect your share price. It could, we've had situations where CEOs' profiles have been copied on Instagram, and they could post a few comments, and how could that affect the business? Then, it just has a kind of a ripple effect. And I think it's very important to have a social media policy in place, not just being responsive to social media when someone queries on your account, but rather what happens when someone infringes upon your business or tries to dilute your brand or commit fraud.
Yeah, I would fully agree. And I think we have to urge companies to have these policies in place. It is, however, for musicians, that's usually a one-man show, difficult to understand the advertising and marketing spaces. They just want to churn out music. So, Graham, tell me, would a musician have a social media policy, and is it something that you advise them on?
Oh, I wanted to input some more on what Daniel was saying, but okay, some other stuff there. The idea of a musician having a social media policy for themselves is like, doesn't happen, what musicians would be wise to do, and any creator, whether they're anywhere in the copyright industries who creates, they'd be wise to read the social media policies, terms and conditions, and the privacy. So once you know the rules, now creators are notoriously bad at reading rules, but if you understand the rules there, at least you know what you're in for. But I would take social media from a complete another perspective here, just giving your audience, particularly in Cape Town. And, there's the brand perspective, but then there's another big hole, which is called the social media of employees. This is possibly the biggest threat facing counterfeiting. And when I say counterfeiting, we look at us where we have a borderless world. We don't have borders anymore. We just have these internet things flying around, and we have content flying around, and then we have content being monetized. So possibly the most important thing that the board would look at, what is the social media policy that has affects employees? It's actually part of the employment agreement. And if you're working in law enforcement, actually, if you're working at Cape Town Harbour or at OR Tambo, you're part of the National Key Points Act, which means you're a step away from the Official Secrecy Act. Now, what you understand to connect the dots is that you've got huge criminal syndicates who are cruel, who are merciless, heartless, and they don't care. And how many people are working? How much money is crossing these borders every day? And if you want to go into the copyright space, how much is flying around the internet? So the social media issue becomes something very different, something very not flowery, not nice, not pleasant. You're actually a target for the criminal syndicates. It is that serious. So the idea of having a policy, organizations should actually do a social media audit on all their staff. They should have a register of everything, and then just simply use softwares which are available to monitor them, archive them. I mean, this is no longer personal and not personal.
Okay, can I ask you, when you say have a register, if you can just expand, what would a register include?
Okay, so let's take position X, the senior communications manager. Yeah, give us all your hashtags, all your handles, the lot, right? That's part of your employment agreement, especially if you're in law enforcement. The laws covering this are the same for you 24/7. They don't distinguish between personal and work. So the register would include every single employee, director, and any closed service providers, complete handle, all their social media. Secondly, that would be plugged into software, which would monitor that, archive it, and keep it safe so that the organization is in touch with what's going on its own staff's issue. The corruptive element in the money flowing, as you know, Dan,
yes,
is beyond reproach here. We talked through this week with some clever patent and trademark guys about how much was flowing and how they come up with incentives.
So I'm
Graham,
just saying.
Just
okay.
a second, Daniel.
Okay.
Graham, you're making a very good point. I think one of the channels that one can utilize to protect against copyright piracy is using the employment systems in place. If companies can start monitoring their employees, certainly we will have a wider scope, more enforcement happening. So I definitely agree that's a very good point and that one should be looking at how we can have these synergies happening. Please go ahead, Daniel.
I think, monitoring employees, I think it does touch on a few, obviously, legal issues when it comes to privacy. If you have 1,000 employees and they give you their social media handles and then they post something and it's an opinion-based post, that could have some sort of ramifications. I think what should happen rather is that staff are educated on how you use social media rather than the employer dictating and overseeing what a person is doing in their, say, private space. If they're posting comments relating to the business, that's one thing that should be monitored. But I do think there's a division where privacy comes into it, and it is a very sensitive area when it comes to social media. But I think many people don't understand, what social media is, and because it's so easy to distribute content, they think it's allowed. So, for instance, at school, if you copied something and put it on, copied an article and handed it in, you would be punished by your teacher for plagiarism. But we get so used to it that, you get an image on WhatsApp, you just forward it to someone else, and no one really understands what intellectual property is, how potentially artists are suffering if you're not contributing to their revenue stream or royalties by listening to their music or reading their books. And I think it comes down to education at a school level and at a university level. When I studied law, I think we went to the same university, the Rand Afrikaans University, many moons ago. In my law degree, I didn't even touch on intellectual property. It wasn't offered as a course in the LLB. It was something that you had to do as an additional area, and I just happened to fall into this particular space. So
sorry,
I
Daniel,
do think,
Daniel,
yes,
Daniel, sorry, I mean, just to not leave your point about privacy for a second, if I could interrupt. Yeah, Amanda,
yes.
Is that okay? I want to clarify a single point here. When we are talking to law enforcement, which is the audience that we have, and you are subject to things like Official Secrets Act, or you're working for the Standard Bank or one of the banks, you have rules burned in your employment agreement as to what you can do and what you can't do. It's simply put, if you look at what each employee of every single customs and excise unit in this country, what the value on their head is for these big criminal syndicates, and it's all about blackmail. So first and foremost, we have to assist. And the second part of the assistance is awareness, as you pointed out. It's not training, it's constant awareness of the fact that the social media has a very, very dark underbelly. Ransomware, phishing, or we can go on, hacking, malware. It just gets worse, as you know. So, sorry to interrupt you, but I didn't want to leave that privacy point. So I'm not talking a general sort of thing for everybody. I'm talking specifically where if you've got huge value, a huge risk, a huge downside. I mean, yesterday they talked about mass murder with all those fake pills and fake pharmaceuticals. I mean, that's really serious. If we look at the prism of social media to the fact that, you could be participating in mass murder, let's call a spade and say, well, look, we can't make something for everybody, but we need to focus. If we're looking at counterfeiting, we're looking at this cross-border issue, we need to be constantly conscious that we are all, even creators at the end of the day, subject to high level, highly sophisticated, as Tobias said earlier today, highly sophisticated criminal networks. And let's get real about that.
Okay, let me jump in at this point and allow the women to say something. Renee, I'd like to know what your views would be if your company's employees are sharing illegal films using your company's hardware, bandwidth, and all the tools available to them. And one would assume that you would like to take steps against them. So please expand a little bit and then we can hand to the gentleman again.
Of course, like both of the gentlemen correctly stated, it is in your employment agreement and it might be even a dismissible offense. Employees have to not only create awareness, like Graham said, but awareness actually what is contained in your employment agreement and how to use company tools and company technology and company time. But I also agree with Graham that there's no harm in a bit of education. I know in schools, the life orientation that is, everybody has to take the subject. It's compulsory. They can work in a bit of copyright respect of IP, or just teach the children in high school every year a bit more what copyright and what IP rights are, because it's a foreign part of the law. No one wants to take it. No one wants to stress in it. It's just a foreign concept, and that we need to make it a more common, a more I don't know what I don't have words for it. People must speak about it more. People must know about it more, and then I think they'll be in a position when someone sends you books and things on your Facebook page without you asking, to tell those people off or to block them. But at the moment, people are just ignoring it. And if I can just mention part of company policy, when one finds someone ripping someone's IP or copyright or sharing it, one needs to be able to report it somewhere. One need not only to Facebook, but one need to be able to report that certain person, for instance, to, if it's NASPERS copyrighted works, to NASPERS, and there must be someone where you can report it to. But I think people feel helpless. They don't know what to do if they get music, they just delete it, or they don't know what to do if they get newspapers and books. They don't know who to send it to. They don't know if it's allowed. They don't know what to do with that information. And to add a bit to respect of copyright, I think that is a huge problem, not in business, but in the layman person's view and situation.
Thank you, Cornel.
And lots of the sharing happens outside work. A lot of it happens outside work. I don't know anyone who hasn't got uncapped, unshaped 120 megabytes per second speed Wi-Fi anymore. They sit during the day and night. That's all they do on Facebook is sharing. And yeah, that's my view.
So the one point that all four of us certainly agrees on, and you mentioned that we need a bit of awareness and education, but I think we need a whole lot of it. So it's very important that each one of us focuses on what are we going to do to tell us a little bit more about the education initiatives that you're involved in.
So we do a variety of different things. We do webinars, podcasts. We do a lot of in-house training for large corporates, businesses that are in the online space, getting them to understand what is intellectual property, what steps they can do to protect themselves. If there are issues, what can they do? Like we've been saying, Corne was saying, how do you report it? We sometimes find that a customer will come to us or a client would come to us and we'd see a string of emails going back 2 weeks where someone found some online content that was either infringing, defamatory, or something along those lines, and it's taken 2 weeks just to get to us. Now, if that was streamlined, we would receive it straight away and try and action it as quickly as possible. So I do think part of it is training in-house, getting people to understand how to identify it, how to collect the information, because a lot of our clients' customers find these issues. You know, they get the text message or the WhatsApp message saying, go for your COVID vaccine. And we see a lot of that in the UK, where you click on it and you go to a fake government website and it says, enter your, they just have to know where can they go and how can they do it. I often hear, and I'm quite removed from this, because what we do is we remove the superficial infringement, the infringement that you see online. We don't go beneath that to find out who the person is. That's, you know, there are other authorities that do that. But many people say, go to the police station or report it to your police. But what do they do? You know, we've had situations where we've gone to the police and they've got you know, the old phones. They don't use smartphones. And you're telling them that you were defrauded on your smartphone, iPhone 13, via this method. So I think enforcement has to really be stepped up. But I do think that privately people can take action. What is also very important is to also understand when you shouldn't take action. There are some brand owners that take this blanket cover. The minute they see their brand anywhere, they go all guns blazing, get it down. In some cases, that could backfire because it could infringe upon freedom of speech and various other rights. So it has to be strategic. You know, a lot of people use software that send out automated emails. We sometimes get that because we manage large brands and they haven't done their background work and they're actually sending a letter to themselves. Is that, you know, you have to know what battles to fight, and it has to be strategic, but you need to train them. You have to understand what is copyright, how does it fit into social media, what is trade or a trademark, because people tend to confuse IP. They don't know the difference between patents, trademarks, copyright designs. And I do understand it's difficult and it's not really accessible. So it's constant education within companies, within universities, and within schools, as we've all been saying, that children need to know. You can't simply just forward things. I always say to people, it's like taking a company letterhead. If you're at a barbecue or a bride for the South Africans, you wouldn't take out your backpack and say to them, you know, look at this magazine, what I found, and pass it around. But on your phone, if you feel anonymous, if you post it to a group or if you online, you feel you just yourself an actual act. But meanwhile, you are a participant. And understanding that's very important.
Audience is not as only the youth, the 14 to 18-year-old, the Gen Zs. It's moving into the older generations. Do you please want to explain a little bit further about that view?
Okay. Let me start from the point of, in this entire issue that we're discussing in the copyright industries, we must not lose sight of things like KYC, know your customer, KYS, know your subject. We're looking at a media explosion. By the way, 14 to 18 is generation alpha. 18 to 25 is Z. And then, by the way, there's also a thing called youth anymore. We've got Instagrammers who don't do TikTok and they don't do Facebook. We've got Facebookers. These generations is sitting at the greatest divide ever seen. Everybody under 25 does not consume, communicate, media or content in any way somebody over 25 does. It's that cut and dry at the moment. So if you think going to the newspapers, radio and TV are going to talk to under 25s, you're out. You're actually out. There's a completely different approach to them. Now, we've got a lot of older generations who latecomers into things. Some call them BBC, born before computers. But a lot of the older generation is social media greatly helps them. And these are people who don't change habits very easily. They really work with the issue of the stick, the fear factor, that this and this is wrong. And you see all over the world, pensioners and grandmothers get nailed by big companies who really don't care other than to try and make the point. This is really serious. You can't go and download these movies. So you forgive the older generations because the communication to them would not be the same that you would do on TikTok, and that would not be the same that you would do on Instagram, and that would not be the same that you would do on Facebook. And by the way, there's the millennials thing. So we have a society which is now pretty much structured generationally on social media platforms. So it really speaks to us the fact that social media is, on the one hand, a great thing. They don't provide favor of social media, they see it as a good thing. But what you have to realize in the context of this conference is that social media has another side of the coin. It's a very thin coin. There's not much in between. And that coin is the fact that it is jacking value from the copyright industries. It's destroying lives with bad pharmaceuticals. It's a really, really serious issue. So for me, I'm in favor of a dual approach, which is a strong awareness and educational approach that is oriented to speak to the subject you know. And by the way, it's the same goes for the criminals. You need to know this. You're not up here playing games here. This is really, really, really serious. So education, yes, but for me, enforcement is a big issue. And one of the problems that we have in South Africa is that we do not regulate online contracts. It's called, sorry, people in Cape Town, we in Joburg say DA, Dorp Action. It's a wrong thing to do and not regulate online contracts. Many countries in the world do. There's significant impact. And what do I mean by regulate online contracts? Every single contract used online in this country should be registered. There should be a licensing office and certain practices that you cannot do, so the innocent person who will never, ever, ever use it or will never read them doesn't have to fall prey. And this is where some of the biggest problems we have in copyright actually sit in the terms of the online contract. So sorry to take away from the subject. The generational issue and how we communicate is something we have to think very carefully about. It is no longer traditional. We are out the box again. And I think that we have to completely think out the box all the way.
Yeah, it's going to challenge us, especially for us older generations that you've mentioned. So we have to change behavior, it seems, Graham. We have to look at different categories of users and channels that they utilize, and we have to change the way they think. So, Daniel, give us a few examples of how you think we can change this behavior, and then we'll hand over to Corné to add to that.
Yes, I'd just like to add to what Graham said and then deal with that is, I'm sure all of you have probably watched the Tinder Swindler. I watched it the other day. It's basically, I hope I don't spoil it for people that haven't, but it's essentially someone that created a profile on Tinder and dated several people and eventually defrauded them of a lot of money. And what was very surprising was that at one part of the interview, one of the victims, the interviewer asked her, so, and this is after she was defrauded of about maybe $100,000, are you going to go back onto Tinder and carry on dating? And she said yes, without a question, didn't even hesitate. She was defrauded of $100,000 from, it obviously wasn't, it extended beyond the site and the service itself, but she didn't question whether there would be any other further issues. So I do think it comes down to breaking down social media and making people understand its impact in our daily lives. When I'm catching the tube, you look at everyone, they're sitting there on their mobile phones. When you get a new mobile phone, the first app that you download, and it's probably for everyone, it's WhatsApp. WhatsApp is like the default position for any form of communication you have. And while they do say it's end-to-end encryption, I've noticed if I send my wife something, for instance, where should we go on holiday, then what happens is without me searching, but they pick up certain keywords, I then log into Facebook, and Facebook has ads of holiday places. So clearly they're looking at keywords. So I do think to change people's behavior, it's all about awareness. It's conferences like this which I think is very important. And as you can see, Graham and myself and Connor are pretty animated about this, because being at the coalface, you see what issues people are facing and you see the devastation it can cause. And I think just the person's reputation, one thing that we haven't even spoken about is online bullying.
Yes.
So I'll probably let Corne deal with it, because you see a lot of our faces in this chat. So I'll hand over to you.
Thank
No,
you.
earlier, Graham, when you do the CEO's profiles and LinkedIn and things, it's not only monetary. Reputational damage can sometimes be much more devastating to someone or someone's career or company than straightforward monetary. And like you said, lots of celebrities and actresses and actors, they suffer through abuse through social media and things, and that damages their reputation as well, or they share untruthful things, and there's nothing one can do about it. So it's a reputation as well. I would like to see that there's a reporting structure that people can know, but more the layman, you two are well intertwined and involved with companies and organizations and associations. I think the layman person, the BBCs, born before copyright, or what did you say? Born before content.
Computers.
Oh, born before computers, same thing. I would like to see that they can be equipped as well on their relevant platform, Twitter or via Facebook, what copyright is and what to do when you find someone sharing stuff for you, sharing content with you, what to do. And then obviously every platform have awareness and education on that platform, like Graham's, not Graham,
Daniel.
targeting that specific era and that specific user or person on their own platform. So there must be a diversity, a few programs that one needs to get involved or launch. But I also agree that enforcement is a good way to deter people and to teach people and to show people that copyright does exist and copyright owners can do something. It is also a very good educational platform. Educational thing is enforcement, and to let people they know what happened with the enforcement. Broadcast that on Facebook, broadcast that on Twitter, so that creates a lot of consumer awareness as well. It's the news.
Yeah, right. Before I allow you to jump right in, we have about 8 minutes left, and we are touching on enforcement. So very recently, I've seen WhatsApp groups popping up and people sharing content blatantly. So even if they warned with multi-choice, and we have two of us in the room also today who was part of the previous panel. Perhaps you can just expand a little bit on it. I'm going to give you only 3 minutes, two of us, so that we have you also just share the practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. When you look at that is not with the impact, because I say the impact goes to the whole value chain. Everybody gets affected. Even if you are the end user, you still get affected. If somebody was supposed to get 10 rand out of their work, they are going to get 1 cent at the bottom of it. Because all is lost, and somebody who lost, where is lost, taxes are not being paid, there is fraud, there is all other issues. When we deal with enforcement, physical enforcement is far much easier. But now you need to have equipment. Enforcement now move from the physical to the other space now, to the technological space, where our police, customs, whatever, the skill sets needs to be changed in order to help us do that. Even from our side, it's changing. We used to walk around, follow people, but right now it's just from your computer, your phone, you can do that. And as we're even speaking about the, the awareness, there is a story about America in the 60s and the 70s. What they did, because a lot of Italian people now asked the times of typing and so on. They went to primary schools to teach people to say, tell your parents to later. They didn't tell the parents because the parents are the old generation. And in the 80s, they started to see that change. It took a generation, but the little ones, they were not literate. If my way through this to happen, yeah. And so on, we try to reach out the legal people, because if we are not working as one, we are not going to be able to win this battle and to conquer this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tobias. I think that was very valuable for us to hear. Daniel, apart from playing whack-a-mole and trying to just close down these websites, what other actions can be taken to deter the infringements?
Yeah, it is very difficult. The whack-a-mole approach, doesn't always work. I think you need a strategic approach. You have to choose your battles. I think the problem is a blanket approach doesn't always work. And being strategic, investigating, finding out, is this person a repeat infringer? Can you find out where they're based? So I think a lot of work needs to be done around that. There are ways to kind of address it within the social media space. I think it's also talking to social media companies. The real issue is that if you go into Facebook to try and report a page or a group is very difficult. And you have to scroll through the terms and conditions, and you may not even find it. And I think that's not accessible. So I do think that companies need to, first of all, assess their risk. And that's where I earlier said that they should conduct a social media audit. And this audit is very different to the one where people are trying to find out what customers are saying. This is what infringers are doing. And once they can see the scope of it, then they can work out the best way to handle that. But it needs to be strategic and not the scattergun approach.
Good. Gurna, you've also lived a few successes. I think criminal prosecution that happened way back in the day for uploading content. Please share a little bit of what happened and how you went about with us.
I agree totally with Daniel and his approach. Got nothing to add there. Yeah, but you must remember, like Tobias said, in the past it was more about hard goods infringement, and it was easier to enforce. Skill sets must change. For instance, if you want to lay a criminal charge, you can't simply lay a criminal charge at the police for sharing. What must they do with it? They need information. They need evidence of the person. That you need to build a case, like Daniel said. You need to choose your battle, build a case against the uploader, against the person who uploads and shares, the person who necessarily downloads and uses the content, like going into a Nike shop and buy a pair of fake Nike shoes. You can't do anything to me. Using the contents is more civil. If you want to go criminally, you need to go against the person who distributes. So that, in our new terms, would be the uploader. We've identified an uploader of content. It was via YouTube and pirate movie sites before I left Turkey many years ago. and we got a successful prosecution. The person tried to defend himself. We made sure that he had knowledge and that we follow everything through the book, tracing him, seizing his equipment. We could build a real good case against him for uploading. But again, there was challenges with law enforcement and prosecution and your presiding officers to explain to them it's almost the same as a distributor. It's almost the same as a shop owner. Then you must also prove damage. Damage to reputation, to the brand holder, or financial damage. So it's not as easy as it sounds, but it is definitely doable. And I think if you choose your battle, like Daniel says, and Graham also earlier, on enforcement, it can be a very good awareness tool to do a proper enforcement exercise.
Yeah, definitely. Hang it on the big clock. If I want to beat Thomas's record, I must cut the panel short right away. But perhaps I must allow Linda, just the panel members, each one a few closing remarks. Starting with you, Graham.
Okay, I just wanted to follow on the thread of what you said. Yes. Picking up on what they both said, I'm in favor of what's called deep intelligence. And that's human intelligence, and that's also technical intelligence. I'm a believer that this leads to prevention and moves away from cure, which means an entire upgrade out the box of the skill set and the awareness of all players in law enforcement, because the future that is faced, and we in the copyright industries are hugely affected by their effectiveness at what they do. So if they want assistance to bridge the gap right now, which exists between practice, what's going on in practice, and what's going on in law and law enforcement, that's an important bridge that needs to happen. But my approach is to really gather what we call admissible evidence, and then no noise, it just happens. Down, you're out, done. And this issue of trying to make publicity about law enforcement, I reckon law enforcement should disappear from publicity on these matters of infringements and takedowns and things.
There has been publicity for law enforcement, publicity that copyright owners do care about their brands and they will enforce it.
Yes,
Successful
well, that's that, but this standing around like we're big winners on something you don't win. We're in a very, very...
No, that is not what I meant at all.
Okay.
Just to create awareness that wrongdoing can be prosecuted. And that this copyright infringement is a type of wrongdoing. And it's the same as theft.
Yeah, I agree with you. Just as a spokesperson rather than the people doing it.
Okay, so Daniel,
I would like to end, Amanda.
Could I go ahead? Then after you, we will allow Daniel.
I just want to say that we need to get a message out and education that people think sharing is caring, especially in difficult times. But sharing is not caring if you're hurting someone.
Good. Well said. Good night. Daniel, a few closing words from your side.
Just adding what Corné said, yes, education is very important. One thing that we didn't touch on, and I'll do it very quickly so you're within your time frame, is security, is making sure that you are controlling your social media accounts. We had a situation recently, and I think I'd like to leave the people with this, is a social media account of a company was hacked, and what the hackers did is they uploaded pornographic content to the Facebook page. What happened was Facebook then took it down because it breached their policies. So what happened there was a hack, and then Facebook actually took it down. So the issue there is you have to make sure you've got the security in place, and security falls in line with what Corné was saying, and Graham, is education. Education is an all-encompassing part. People need to attend webinars like this. They need to educate themselves online. They need to understand the importance of social media, and then it wasn't just sharing family photographs around the barbecue. There's more to it, and if they understand that, they'll take it very seriously.
Daniel, thank you very much. So on that note, and thanking the expert panel members And while Big Brother is watching us and we are trying to balance enforcement and education, we are beaming back to you from the social panel to the mothership, Linda. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, everyone. That was a really interesting session. Really, really good. And because it was a social media panel, I'm telling you that the different rooms are connecting with me through WhatsApp, and I'm getting lots of little hands of applause. So this applause is for you all. It's for you all. Well done. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure.
So now, as we move into our closing part of our event, we are going to have the special privilege of listening to two people for their closing remarks. And of course, I'm going to go live to the stage in Cape Town and receive the wonderful Professor who gave us a great intervention live on the stage, and which is going to get more of this excellence. So, Chris, welcome to the stage, and over to you. Have we lost Chris? Is Chris in the room?
I am unlosable.
Yes, looking good, looking good.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for the welcome and introduction again. Organizers very much for the privilege of allowing me to have the opportunity to make a few closing remarks, and a happy task, I might add, but a difficult one, because this has been a truly wonderful conference. It has primarily been looking at still growing respect for IP in Africa, but it's reached a very wide scope, has great depth and breadth in terms of subject matter. It is of interest to, obviously, Africans, but these are problems and issues that are relevant globally speaking. The organizers really must be congratulated for conceiving, planning, and executing this much needed forum. Many current, topical, and relevant hot issues have been addressed with particular reference to Africa, but as I've said, of global significance. The prime purpose of what we set out to achieve is to enhance and create awareness. This is something that comes through in all the discussions that we've been having, awareness of IP, to recognize what it is, to identify it, then to understand its nature and its value and difficulties and importance of enforcing these rights. And we've had 6 wonderful sessions that kind of led into a crescendo almost this afternoon, which has been very exciting. But it started with a discussion, or what was called the big debate, and it examined enforcement issues, IP, in the African context. We had speakers from Ghana, from Kenya, from Maripa, based in Harare, and South Africa. And it was a very good opening session to set the scene, to highlight shortfalls and progress. It emphasized regional in dealing with these matters. I was one of a panel that had to grasp an unpleasant or certainly emotive nettle on the subject of the pharmaceutical rights versus terribly important rights to public health, both in terms of South African Constitution and the TRIPS and other agreements. And I think that was worthwhile. I think it highlighted that it is a complicated situation, and certainly our knowledge levels as to precisely what is going on in detail behind the scenes at the moment to try and negotiate for African countries right to vaccine in Africa from the European Union. It's a complicated and not very clear situation. The third session on the first one on Wednesday dealt with Africa in comparison. It again examined the enforcement of IP in Africa, and particularly factors that exacerbate and cause difficulties in anti-counterfeiting efforts. but also looked at furthermore at positive developments and training that has been done. We then the first step into the digital space, which clearly is the current and most critical area where difficulties arise in terms of respect for IP, was looking at supply chain problems and counterfeiting and how destructive the introduction and the presence of counterfeit goods in the supply chain that is destructive to that chain. And it emphasized to some extent the use of appropriate technology to counter the threats arising from counterfeit goods and their passage through the supply chain. Today really got exciting, and we were squarely in the digital space with our first session this afternoon on digital IP, highly topical aspects. We looked at the pirate activities in the recording, music, publishing industries. We looked at how businesses can be destroyed. And then I was very pleased that we got an ISP perspective and a very empathetic one, I might add, from the speaker relating to takedown policies and non-judicial procedures. Now, the most recent session, which was fresh in our minds, was really as exciting as it was terrifying. I think we all feel very daunted by the problem. And let's be honest, 90% of it has been about the problem, the massive extent of infringements that are taking place across all media, and how there's been a shift from the counter activities to counter piracy and counterfeit goods from the physical to the online and digital space. Just from my perspective, just looking at this latest session, Daniel spoke about many things, but he looked at one of the aspects was taking down offensive content without necessary judicial involvement at all. Graham emphasized the massive level of infringement online. Cornet appropriately spoke about the new pandemic, namely sharing in an unauthorized way of IP content. Daniel and Graham both stressed education initiatives that need to be taken, and that it's not sufficient to, we have to move into the digital space in terms of our training. So what are the takeaways and what are the to-dos arising from this conference? Well, there are many of them. Obviously, there must be every effort made to continue to spread knowledge, and this is across the board. Youth has been emphasized, but certainly in the public space and in the space of the audience here present today, the enforcement authorities, and the training emphasis should obviously be now in the online space. And that is going to require an understanding of technology and how to do and how to understand and access and deal with these problems. I think at a broader level, and I'm mindful of the presentation, rather impassioned presentation by the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, that we start looking at tailoring IP enforcement and IP policy for the African continent. And look specifically at our situation. It comes through very strongly that in attempting to do all these things and enforcement, there's got to be a very strong partnership between the public and private sectors in training and doing the things that are necessary. Another shocking thing, which I think we all felt very strongly, was the discussion about what was termed mass murder when it came to the importation and sale of illicit drugs, counterfeit drugs, which have led to many deaths by the current figures that have been presented. And I think that, and the point was made, that goes beyond the IP issues. Clearly there is a counterfeit issue here, but that really also requires more focused and intense government intervention at a higher level, if you like. So that has been what we've been discussing. As I say, the breadth is enormously wide and deep. And I want to just say, well done and thank you. I want to thank our organizers, particularly here in Cape Town. I want to thank Amanda Lottringen, who, as you know, Senior Manager, Counterfeit and IP Enforcement at CIPC. I think we need to also thank Tess Pruis and her team from Crystal Events, who have been marvelous in setting up. It's really gone well. I've been to conferences where the online screens are down and things don't work. It's been wonderful here. And then, of course, how can I not take a special moment to say thank you to our ever cheerful, ebullient, and energetic head leader, also known as Linda Pereira. I still don't quite know where you are, Linda. I suspect Portugal, but it might be somewhere else entirely. Thank you for leading and steering this discussion with your cheerful way. And yes, you can blush now. That's perfectly acceptable. We'll have a round of applause in a minute. I just need to then I still have some thank yous and well done. First of all, secondly, rather, to our moderators, to our speakers. Really, these have been of the highest standard. Moderating and the speakers. And thank you for giving your time and energy and sharing your knowledge with us. It's really been a truly high class. I'm very, very proud of the contribution that you have made. And then, last but certainly not least, you present here in Cape Town and those present online, thank you for participating. Thank you for your active interest. I can see when one stands here, like doing lecturing in the education space, that you have been alert, you have been participated, you've been interested, even taking some notes. You might even have passed the exam that was set for you at the workshop. I hope you all get through. But can we all have a round of applause for everybody I've mentioned, for all the efforts that everybody has made. On that uplifting note, my parting words are that the online digital space problem is so massive, and it is far surpassed the problem that we had with physical goods in the traditional manner of going to seize them on the street corner or the warehouse or whatever. And really, this is going to require some very, very focused effort at all levels, government, private sector, to get to grips with that. It's now, the final word is, I'm happy to say, and now I'd like to hand over to the Executive Manager, Innovation and Creativity at CIPC, Namonde Maimela, and I ask her to kindly make some closing remarks. Namonde, nice to see you online and introduce you, but over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Namonde. Yes, you are.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris, for that introduction. You've already thanked all the delegates, but let me close it off by wishing I wish to thank all the delegates that were physically in the room there. I see it looks like you had more fun than us who are on virtual for the last 3 days. We appreciate your time. Your dedication warms my heart and gives me assurance that we have a team of officials to protect our South African borders and abroad, and also to protect the domestic market from counterfeit goods. Thank you too to those who joined online like me. Well, I was told that this physical conference enabled a vibrant networking platform. I trust contacts and relationships created here will be of much use as you depart to your different workstations to continue this important critical work that you are all doing. Collaboration can only contribute to ensuring that enforcement of IP rights are effective, not only here at home in South Africa, but also outside our borders, and especially in our continent. Your deliberations, questions, and responses, I hope they added to the positive outcomes, and I thank you for that. Now, CIPC takes its responsibility of promoting respect for IP, training, and capacity building very seriously. You know, I was listening here as it was emphasized that education. We take that seriously. We intend to build on the past 3 days and welcome all the requests for further training. We also look forward to you using the AJS cell phone app to assist us in building an accurate database that allows leaders to identify trends and stay one step ahead of these criminals. On this note, ladies and gentlemen, I hope the program met your expectations, and I wish you all a safe journey back home. Keep up the good work, and congratulations.
Thank you, Namandi. Thank you very much for your intervention. And what fantastic 3 days that we have here. It was amazing, but a little story has to be told. Just over 18 months ago, a person who is in the room, who is convinced that this is one of the topics that Africa must face and that Africa must pick up and Africa must discuss, told me and a lady called Tess Cruz, who is in the room, the CEO of Crystal Events, that he had a dream to organize a conference on this theme. And here we are. It was through his dream and provoking myself and Tess, 2 women, to voluntarily help him build this conference. And then we approached Amanda, and together we created this amazing partnership. I'm so proud. But the seed was with Souza Rosario, who is in the room. So Souza Rosario, I congratulate you for your ambition. And this is also because of you. Is Souza in the room? I just want everybody to know him. Would he please stand up? Because it was because of him that we are all gathered here for these last 3 days. Souza, he convinced all these women and me and Tess for 18 months to dedicate our time voluntarily to raising and putting together this conference. And we are so proud to know you. Thank you, Souza. Thank you very much also to our partner through the company's Intellectual Property Commission. It was wonderful to work with you and all the people that came in through you for the conference. Thank you for the technical teams led by the wonderful Jared in Cape Town and all the multi-hub venues with all their technicians, because they had to be there as well to help us have an audience, which peaked this afternoon, the highest number at 1,708 people watching and participating in this event. I could not be prouder. Tess, you are amazing to work with. The conference is brilliant. Thanks to the background team and to the girls online, all those logos that you see, there is someone behind working online. Also an all-girls team, which is I'm very proud of. But above all, thank you to the audience, to the speakers. Thank you for being here. You made it all worthwhile. Watch out for the live conference dates for next year. And I hope to see you all live as well as online, but live preferably. Stay well, stay safe, and give yourselves a round of applause. See you next year.